Thank you and welcome to FCA International's May safety call. We'll get started with Mike Hartnett, our safety professional consultant, to present for us today. Thanks for being here with us today, Mike.
You're welcome. Always happy to be here with FCA International. Today, we're going to be talking about safety inspections. It might not be exciting and sexy, but it is something that we really need to make sure we're on top of, both on site and in shop, right? So let's start off same way we always do and talk about the FCA Safety Helpline. This is available. It's a resource for you provided by the FCA International. Call us when you have a question that's safety related. We're more than willing to help and we're here available for you. We'll either reach out by email or phone, depending on how you reach out to us, and we'll get you a question quality from a safety professional. So our outline today, we have a lot to talk about with inspections because there's a lot to them. Right, we're going to talk about what is a safety inspection and how we start them. Right, do we do daily ones? Do we do frequent? What's a monthly, annual? All of those are questions that people are really not sure where they fall in. We'll talk about pencil whipping, which is a common problem that we all have when it comes to inspection. Talk about some of the digital options that we have out there, and then how we can perform better inspections, how to get better as inspectors ourselves. And then we'll come back with what did I miss section and touch base on anything that we didn't cover. So what is a safety inspection? Safety inspection has a lot of different definitions and it depends on what you're looking at. OSHA says that we have to do job site inspections. Regular job site inspections have to happen in a regular interval, right? They have to be frequent and regular, and they have to be made by competent persons that the employee designates. Competent person is a definition that OSHA uses that always means the same thing. Somebody that has the knowledge and training to be able to assess hazards and predict hazards that are likely to happen and has the authority granted by the employer to correct those hazards when they see them. Right? So that's our expectation from OSHA on just your general job site inspection. But we have many more inspections that we're responsible for than just that. So before we get too deep into this, I want to talk about the difference between an audit and an inspection, because these are two different words that are often used interchangeably, right? It's not much different if you ask the average man on the street or average woman on the street, what's the difference between an audit and an inspection? But there is a big difference. And that difference really rears its ugly head if there's ever litigation, okay? Because an audit is in depth. An audit focuses on a safety management system and goes and dives deep. This is similar to an ISO audit for ISO 9001 or 14001. Very well defined and digging deeply into the issue. While an inspection is a thorough examination of the workplace. Right. So one of them is going to take the audit is going to take a full team. It's going to take a team a large amount of time, right? More than an hour, often more than a week to fulfill. So you can expect that the outcomes between an inspection, which should take a limited amount of time, and an audit, which is much more in depth, they're going to have different outcomes. So if we call an inspection an audit and we end up in litigation, the burden of what we're supposed to have from an audit will be much higher. So just be careful of what terminology you're utilizing internally. And when you're looking at different apps, I know iAuditor was a very common app. And my understanding is they just changed their name recently, maybe for the same reason. All right, so we need to make sure at the start of the shift that operators are inspecting their equipment, right? This equipment does not necessarily require documentation, right? This is own personal equipment being used. Your personal fall arrest system, the daily inspection is required by the operator prior to use. And same thing with ladders and power tools, rigging. All of these have to be document or need to be inspected prior to use. But there's not really a requirement for documentation. The proof is in the pudding. Right? If it's damaged when an inspector comes to look at it, then it wasn't inspected. Right. So if OSHA comes and to investigate an injury and they find a damaged ladder, then it's going to be hard to show that we did inspect it. And likely we didn't at that point in time. So when we're looking at those, we can find checklists and for any of these items that need to be inspected. Right now, I said that we do not need to document a fall arrest system inspection for the daily, and we don't. But we do need to make sure our employees know what they're looking for, right? And that's part of their training. So part of their training, we should, at the very least, go over what this inspection process entails, what they're going to be looking, right? And we also need to do annual inspections on our fall arrest systems, and you can find those checklists online. There's lots of different options. This one I just grabbed from Yale EDU, but there's plenty out there, especially from the manufacturer themselves. Ladders also have a requirement for an inspection. Right, on the left, you have a sticker that is commonly on a ladder. Right, this is not uncommon to find on ladders. A lot of manufacturers will provide the inspection checklist on the ladder itself, and if not, you can always find stickers that have this inspection information that you can put on a ladder along with the other warning labels that are on it. And so again, this is not a required documented inspection, but it is a required inspection prior to operating that equipment. We're required to inspect our ladders first. So we are also required to document some of our daily inspections. Right? Our mobile elevated work platform, aerial lifts, booms, and scissors, require daily inspections. And this is a larger piece of equipment that should be documented. Your forklifts or telehandlers, whether they're in the shop or on site, these need to be inspected, and that inspection needs to be documented. Same with cranes. Now, when we're looking at where do we find inspection sheets for these, how do we know what to inspect? That's pretty straightforward, right? When we're talking about the MOOPs, you can go to IPAF, International Powered Access Federation. That's the IPAF sheet you have back there. They have a lot of different inspection sheets for MOOPs. You can also go to the manufacturer, which is going to have inspection checklists for them. You're in the owner's manual that is supposed to be on the MOOP itself, and that weatherproof folder will have a inspection sheet on it telling you what to inspect. Right? Scaffolding does not have a checklist, but we do require that daily inspection by a competent person to determine whether or not a scaffolding is able to be used. And there are scaffold tags that we should be using on our scaffolds to document whether or not they have been inspected. Right now, I wouldn't expect this on a smaller single-use scaffold like a mini baker or a Perry scaffold, right? One of those single-person scaffolds. I would not expect a scaffold inspection tag on. right? But when we have a larger scaffold that multiple people are getting on, we do want to have documentation of a daily inspection. Right? And these scaffold tags that have the OK, caution, or danger, different colored tags on it, and then it has a date and a room for a initial on it. Those are good practices that we should be putting in place. Forklifts, telehandlers, cranes, the manufacturers define what those inspection checklists what should be covered in those checklists. So we can generally get them all out of the owner's manual for that. And almost all the manufacturers are going to offer these as PDF documents on their websites. So if we're filling it out in the owner's manual, they're only going to have a limited number of spaces on there until you're out of inspection sheets. So this is something you're going to want to get photocopies of to make sure that you have them available. Print those out. So those are all of our daily required inspections. Right? We also have what are called frequent inspections. And frequent inspections, they have to be performed regularly, right? Which means in a period. It's usually weekly, sometimes monthly. Always at the very least, when changes happen, that would require another inspection, right? So fall protection requires that inspection. And I'm not talking about personal fall arrest systems, right, which will require that daily inspection. I'm talking about fall protection guardrails and other fall protection uh, parts that are put in on site. So when you have a foreman on site, they should be checking at the very least weekly to demonstrate and document uh, what the hazards are. Are the fall protection requirements put in by the general contractor still in place, still in working condition? Right? They should be looking for all safety concerns. If you have a crane on site working for you or a crane operator, they need to be requiring frequent inspections as well. And then other things like your first aid kit, your eye wash bottles, those are going to require frequent inspections, right? Weekly or monthly, depending on what they are. So for our foreman, doing that inspection and documenting it is very important. If you ask a foreman, did you inspect the site? Foreman is going to say, well, I'm always looking for hazards. And that's not necessarily the same thing. If we document a walk around looking for hazards specifically as an inspection, then it's going to qualify. If we get into a litigation situation and they ask for, well, can you show proof of inspection? When was the last time you inspected? And the response is, well, I always look for safety hazards when I'm doing a walk of the site. That isn't going to qualify as an inspection, right? It needs to be regular and documented. So one of the ways we can go about documenting it is going ahead and getting a construction inspection form, right? This is a safety audit form is the only one they can find here. But we can go ahead and look at regular hazards that we expect to be found and corrected within your construction site and put a checklist. How's fall protection? How's housekeeping? How's your temporary electric? All of those are things that need to be addressed, right? Now, we do not necessarily need to document on a checklist that we've performed an inspection. We can document in a journal. As a safety professional, I have a journal that I write in on a daily basis saying what I'm doing. That is permissible in a court of law. So if you have a foreman that has a notebook and says, May 21st, inspection, nothing found, then we have a documentation of that inspection, right? It can be an email, it can be as long as we've documented it, we can then have proof that we've performed an inspection. Monthly inspections that are very common, first aid kits, fire extinguishers, and then cranes. Right. So cranes aren't so much of a concern most of the time with most of the membership here at FCA. But fire extinguishers are something that you should be having on all of your sites, right? We almost always have flammable materials on site, and we're required to do monthly inspections. The monthly inspection is very simple. We have to make sure that the tamper seal, right, which is that Ziploc or zip tie looking thing that secures the pin in, the gauge is in the green, the body doesn't have any holes in it, and if you look in the hose, it doesn't look like it's been discharged. That is a monthly inspection. From there, you go ahead and put in the date and your initials, right? Or you put in your initials for the year on this specific example. First aid kits need to be inspected monthly as well. I don't know how many times inspecting I go and look at a first aid kit and everything in it's expired except for what is missing. Right, so it's important that we do those inspections as well. The purpose of these inspections is to find issues ahead of time or to make sure in an emergency that we have what we need to correct. We also have some annual inspections. Annual inspections include personal fall arrest systems. Fall arrest harnesses and lanyards need to be inspected at least annually. Right? And if you look on any of these harnesses, they're going to have an inspection tracker on the harness itself, as you can see in that picture. Right? That's not the only way we can document it. Right? Skip real quick to the next page where we talk about, here's some inspection checklist logs for fall arrest gear, right? That way we can track all of our fall arrests, not just individually. Checking it individually out in the field, such as this, will not tell us which ones we're missing. And it's really odd, the attachment we get to our fall arrest harnesses. I wore one for many years and I wore the same one year after year after year. And I know once when I was inspecting, I went and I tried to make a bet with a iron worker that his apprentice was younger than his harness. I offered him $100 bet and he would not take it. And he would have lost if he did because his apprentice was only 20 and that harness was 21 years old and covered in burn marks. And this was a gentleman who was pretty hefty. And there wasn't much chance of that harness stopping him if it didn't have burn marks in it. So we need to make sure that somebody other than the operator is inspecting our fall arrest harnesses. Right? That's one of the largest hazards that we have in the finishing trades. Fall arrest needs to be verified by somebody other than the operator at least annually. Cranes need to be documented by a third party annually, and any chain rigging that you might have needs to be documented by a third party annually. So like I said before about inspection checklists, this is an example from 3M that you can get from their website, but a lot of the other manufacturers also have these type of tracking documents available for anybody who wants to use them. Okay, so one of the things we have to realize is that we're in a day and age where it might be a lot easier to perform inspections, document inspections, and track that all of our inspections are being completed by using electronic inspections. There are plenty of different apps out there, right? Fastfield is one that I've used. It's pretty inexpensive. You can import your own checklists or use one of hundreds that they already have made. It's pretty simple and pretty inexpensive as far as that goes. And they can configure it to whatever you need. Another app is Smart Tag It. Smart Tag It has a lot of AI features and it does a lot more than just inspection, right? And you pay for the difference. Can you reap benefits from that? Certainly. Certainly. They have a lot of good predictive and analytical information tied to Smart Tag It, including recording pre-job briefings and rating them for quality across multiple languages. Right? So um, that is pretty good. Predictive Solutions is another app that's been around for well over a decade for performing inspections. My understanding is that Microsoft Teams even has a app that can be utilized for inspection documentation. I haven't utilized it myself, but that's my understanding. There's countless others out. There's lots of different uses out there. And also, if we go with those electronic options, we do not need to limit them to only doing inspections, right? Fastfield is very good at inspections, but it doesn't necessarily have a lot of the other things that other inspections or apps might have. I know Smart Tagit has incident reporting, near miss reporting, and safety alerts, and they kind of have it set up like social media where you can give likes and you can comment on other people's stuff to try to get some of that engagement. Right? But you can, if you go to electronic option, you can use it for multiple things. You're not just limited to inspection documentation. If you're going to look for apps that can make your business more effective and make your compliance easier, you might find that some of these other options that can be added onto it can really benefit as well. So pencil whipping is an issue, right? I've never seen a form that I didn't want to pencil whip. Nobody likes filling out forms, uh, especially if they don't think it's important. If no one is checking those forms, no one is doing anything but pencil whipping those forms. Okay, so performing spot checks of daily operator inspections is important, right? Go out there and make sure that the mobile elevated work platform has been inspected. Talk to the operator on it, and we can coach them on those inspections as well. We can see what they're doing well, what they're not. And when they're doing things well, we can give them that positive reinforcement. If we find deficiencies, we can correct those, right? We can also reinforce and change how they think we're looking at their safety. Because if we're working on a piece of equipment that we feel is unsafe, and we've written on an inspection sheet that it's unsafe, and we told our foreman, and we come back the next day and nothing's done, and we're on the same piece of equipment, how does that make us feel? Our company feels about us, right? That we don't matter, just here making the money, and that's all that matters. And that's going to change the way we look at risk. That's going to change the way we look at safety. And that's going to change the way we look at our employer and our role, right? So we really want to make sure that we are reinforcing those inspections, that we are coaching on what to do when we find something that's not working correctly. And too many times, I know when I was in the field, the feeling was always, we got to get the job done with what we have here, regardless of the condition. And that's just not acceptable because we put people in harm's way. Right. So inspecting the inspections is really important. It lets the people in the field know that these inspections are important. Reinforcing that with our foreman helps them really understand that as well. And trust but verify is the word to go, right? We trust them to perform those inspections, but we're going to verify that they are being done. And we're going to look at the quality of those inspections to make sure that they're not being penciled. We're going to coach people when we find deficiencies, and we're going to reinforce when the job is done well. So the last thing I really want to talk about today is how to perform that inspection. How can we be better at inspection? How many times have you been driving home when you pull into your driveway and you realize you don't remember the past 15 minutes? Which route did I take? I know it happens to me a lot, right? Because when you're doing a routine thing that you do day in and day out, the brain can check out. Right? And the same thing is true when we walk onto a job site that we've been on daily for the last few months. Okay, we go to autopilot. The human brain works on conservation of energy. Okay, it is lazy when it can be. If it doesn't feel that it needs to assess every area for hazard, then it's not going to. It's going to label areas as safe that we haven't even looked at because they've been safe in the past. So one of the ways we can be better inspectors is by telling the brain that it's time to stop being lazy. It's time to pay attention to the details. So this is one method. It's called the 3-level inspection. Really hits that reset, right? It really wakes the brain up and tells it, hey, look for the details. And we're going to start by looking from the knee and below and see what hazards there are in that line of our vision. Then we look at the same area, but from knee to head. And then we look a third time at the shoulder level and above, right? So by breaking the visual field into different parts, all we do is we tell the brain it's time to pay attention to detail. And it's pretty remarkable the difference in what you can find looking at the same spot just through inspection and then looking at it, breaking that visual field into 3, right? Another way to do it is we call the 3 P's of exposure, right? First, we look at the people for behaviors, look and see what they're doing, how they're performing that work, making sure that, there's no unsafe behaviors. And then we look at the plant, right, or the job site for physical conditions and make sure that there's no physical conditions that are causing a hazard. And then the process, right, the system of how we're doing our work and making sure that all of that's in line. Where these 3 things meet, we call that the working interface. And that's where all of our incidents and injuries come, right? Where those 3 things meet up is where we end up with our incidents and injury. So by breaking that field up, either visually or conceptually, we can really wake the brain up and tell it it's time to pay attention to the details. And we can get a lot more out of that same amount of time. And we can get a lot more detailed inspection by doing it that way. Okay, so what did I miss? What to look for? What to look for is really important when you're doing a regular inspection of a job site, right? We really want to make sure that we've inspected different aspects during different times. Are we going to go out and look to make sure that we've had an annual inspection on our fall protection every week? Not likely. But if you set up a schedule for different things that you're going to look for each month, or if you tie what you're looking for to whatever the toolbox talk was that week, you really can change what you're going to find. Because when it comes to inspection, what you look for is what you're going to find. Right? And we all have different pet peeves of things that we're looking for when we inspect a site. And we fall into ruts of finding the same things. By having either a focus of the month or looking at the toolbox talk that was discussed that week, now we have something to look for. Those really important hazards that are going to reach out and grab your attention are going to do that whether you're looking for them or not. But having other things to look for to dive a little bit deeper on now makes it so that we're tracking a lot more over the year. And we're seeing a lot more, which means we're getting better. So, what to inspect? We want to make sure that we're doing, operators are checking their equipment before using it. Right? We want to make sure we're doing our daily inspections on mechanical equipment that we're using to lift material or people. We want to make sure that we have weekly inspections of the site, minimum. And then annual inspections need to be done of our fall arrest systems. Right? Frequency. It depends on the use. Right? We want to make sure that we're inspecting often enough. OSHA doesn't define frequency. They say periodic. Now, that period for some things means annual, like your crane, right? But that periodic inspection could also mean a monthly inspection of your fire extinguishers, right? So it really depends on what the hazard is. That's really what dictates what the frequency of inspection is. Updating checklists. Updating checklists is important because when we don't update our checklist, when we still have marks on our checklist for things that are no longer there, it kind of devalues that checklist. So why am I even looking for this? It's battery operated and they have this whole section on here. Those are some issues. And then training for your inspectors. When we're training people to use equipment, we need to train them on how to inspect that equipment and what to look for. That's really important that we perform that training. For our management in the field, for our foremen, we really need to train them on how to inspect a job site, how to document that, what they're looking for. And when it comes to the inspection process, what's the most important part of the inspection process? I've got to say it's that continuous improvement. Okay, if we are not correcting the issues that we're finding, then what are we inspecting for? Right? That's not really compliance. Performing inspections without correcting issues makes it so that that inspection was useless, that the person who performed it knows there is no value in them spending their time inspecting. People will not do useless work. No matter how well you pay them, people will not do useless work. So if you have them fill out an inspection and don't correct any deficiencies, then that inspection will be pencil whipped forevermore, guaranteed. Right? And one of the other things that we want to check on our longer term issues for continuous improvement is make sure our corrections are still in place down the road. I know we've discussed this when we talk about incident investigation and putting in corrective actions and coming back a few months later to make sure that they're still corrected. For these longer term projects where we have inspections being performed, we want to make sure that we are verifying that they're still in place, that the corrections put in place are still working.
Mike, thank you so much for the presentation today. Lots of great stuff to think about. So thank you very much for that. And we usually take a break during the summer for live calls. So we will continue to post calls for the next few months by video. But again, don't hesitate to reach out with any safety related questions or topics. This is your community, so we want to serve you with it. So don't hesitate. Thanks, Mike.